Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Joining us now, the executive editor of the American Prospect, one of my daily reads. Really, frankly, since David Dayen took it over, what was it now? 5 years ago?
Yeah.
5 years? Oh, geez. David, welcome to the show. Not the interview I want to do with you today. I was hoping that we would be doing your day one agenda for the Harris administration. That's not going to happen.
That has been put in a file listed 2029 or later.
Right. What? All right. I don't know. Your first thoughts, I guess.
Well, I think that there's a perspective that we all have to take on. In the last 20 years, there have been 10 national elections. In 9 of those 10 elections, either the presidency or one chamber of Congress has changed hands. This is only the 3rd time in American history that there have been 3 consecutive one-term presidencies. The only other 2 times were the very tumultuous period before the Civil War and the post-Reconstruction period from 1876 to 1896, which was the height of the Gilded Age. We are in an unusually volatile political moment, and I believe that is rooted in a lack of ability, desire, name your price, on the part of both political parties to meet the needs of the American people.
And so people are constantly dissatisfied and flip.
Right. They ping pong back and forth. Maybe this party will help me. Maybe that party will help me. I mean, in that 20-year period, there are probably 3 or 4 elections that at the time were determined to be realignments, including this one. The 2008 election of Barack Obama was said that now there's an enduring Democratic majority. The 2016 election of Donald Trump was said that now there's an enduring Democratic majority. The 2024 election is being termed in that fashion as well. All of those prior so-called realignments, the very next election, the voters moved rapidly in the direction of the other party. So something is going on here, and it has to do with, there are structural issues that speak to this dissatisfaction, both culturally and I think constitutionally. And there are issues with the parties themselves not speaking to that discontent or speaking to it in a way that ultimately is unsatisfying once the results are shown.
Well, it's also global, right? The anti-incumbency phenomenon this cycle, which maybe when you're looking back at history, if we're talking about the Gilded Age or Reconstruction, it could be viewed as this dissatisfaction with neoliberalism in the West that creates that volatility and that lack of meaning in other Western governments as well, which they've seen.
Yeah, I think that's certainly true globally. This is the first time in 120 years where every major industrialized nation saw their incumbent party lose. That is, it didn't matter whether that party was ideologically on the left or on the right. But, more practically, that speaks to the inflation that happened after the pandemic. And I think what we've clearly learned is that people hate inflation. That when you're talking about a situation of mass unemployment, even if it's extreme, you're talking about 10 million families, maybe 15 million families if it's really, really bad. When you're talking about inflation, that affects every family that isn't fabulously wealthy enough to not notice. And clearly, that has had a very strong pull in the direction of an anti-incumbency mood, and it's happened everywhere.
And even if in certain cohorts wages theoretically outpace inflation, that seems to be not mitigating in any way to people's experience. I mean, it may or may not be mitigating in reality. I don't know, because it's one thing to look at like sort of like the broad statistics. I'm not necessarily getting that wage increase, and my eggs have definitely gone up type of situation. But so,
yeah, I mean, I think that, there are a couple other factors here that cut against this kind of argument that, look, we had a great economy and voters picked the other party. And so providing great things doesn't work. This is a bit of an infuriating mode of argument that I've seen deployed by many people who should know better. We had a pop-up pandemic era safety net that was put in place in 2020, and all of it was taken away under Joe Biden.
Right.
Now, forget about who's responsible for that.
Right.
The fact of the matter is that if you had Medicaid and you were one of the millions and millions of people that had it taken away from you, it was taken away from you under Joe Biden. If you had boosts in unemployment insurance, it was taken away from you under Joe Biden.
Child tax credit.
Child
tax credit. You're getting $300 a month, and all of a sudden it goes away. Nobody's out there. I mean, literally, I've been saying this every day since the election. Nobody out there is going like, well, I appreciate the Democrats giving it to me, but Joe Manchin just made it impossible for me to have it. People don't know this. I mean,
your student loans restarted too. For 40 million people, your student loans restarted under Biden.
On some level,
forget about the agency of who actually is responsible for that. That's the lived experience. And the other part of the lived experience is the rise in interest rates, meaning that it's just the cost of borrowing went way, way up in the last 2 years, and it hasn't really subsided. Right. We've had one interest rate tick down. The second one happened just after the election last week. That means a mortgage, an auto loan, a consumer loan is all more under this regime. And so
I should say about mortgage rates, I just say about mortgage rates, they didn't really come down commensurate with the drop in the Fed interest rate.
They haven't yet. No, they haven't yet. Although they did come down before in anticipation of it. It was kind of
but then it popped back up. Yes.
Yeah.
But, I mean, when you think of those type of headwinds, it's almost it is in some ways surprising that it's still as close as it is, right? I mean, like, Donald Trump got the same.
I don't want to soft pedal what Joe Biden did. There were a lot of things. Full employment is a thing. The actual core inflation of certain goods has gone down. We actually haven't seen grocery inflation in over a year. But you can't escape that there was a reality that people felt that don't match aggregate statistics. And I think that's the really important thing. The other thing is that the things that Joe Biden did that are probably going to be the most impactful over time are happening on very long time horizons. We right now have the biggest boost in manufacturing construction practically that we've seen in American history. However, that's manufacturing construction done mostly by itinerant workers and often by foreign workers. This is not permanent manufacturing jobs in a community. We don't have that just yet because it takes time to build a factory. Similarly, there were some unforced errors in this regard. The Inflation Reduction Act provision around negotiating drug prices in Medicare, some of the negotiations have begun, but the actual effect in terms of prices doesn't hit until 2026. That's how the law was written, and it has no help to
Why do they do
candidates who are
this?
trying to.
Why do they do this?
Exactly.
They did this with Obamacare too. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
like they, and I understand on Obamacare, they did this because, they needed to make it seem like it was cheaper. And so they needed to sort of like elongate the period of time that it was.
Just the opposite with this. It
But
makes
why?
it more
Yes. Yes.
expensive.
Why would you do that?
It,
Like,
it
it's a
made the
political
Inflation
matter.
Reduction Act
Why
more
would you do that?
expensive to not do it that way.
And
the bottom line is on this one is that it's a crass benefit for lobbyists. I mean, it was just to delay this to give drug companies time to earn more profits. It was the small coterie of pro-pharma Democrats that said, okay, well, I guess we have to do this, but let's do it later. Let's push it out. Let's push it out. Let's let them gain some more profits. And so that was the political result of that.
I mean, and it seems to me that the Trump administration could be in position to repeal that and not pay the price of repealing it because nobody knows it's in effect. It would be in effect anyways. I mean, so I guess.
Or on the flip side, they could just take credit for it. I mean,
or they may just take credit for it. Either way, it's. I just want to go back to this, the loss thing, because I think, it may not be fair to say, where's my child tax credits, Joe Biden, and then your proxy, Kamala Harris. But it seems to me, and I imagine you and I had this conversation, and we certainly had it, Emma and I, that the die was somewhat cast in March of 2021. The Democrats had passed the American Rescue Act. The Republican Party their response was to be outraged at 3 Dr. Seuss books that were no longer being published. I'm being literally, this is literally the case. They were this massive bump in social welfare gets passed by the Democrats, almost exclusively Democrats. I mean, like in both chambers. Yeah. And
no, it wasn't exclusively.
All they're talking about is Dr. Seuss.
Do you have this chart, Bradley? This just helps augment your point here. I mean, this is where like there was this drop off.
This is in March of 2022.
I know,
but I'm talking about 2021. Yeah. And instead of going right in to the Build Back Better,
right?
Instead of like going into those negotiations and saying, I want to build Chuck Schumer and I want it September 15th of this year, he invites in the Republicans. They dick around for 2 or 3 months. That's when Joe Manchin's audio comes out of him, basically starting to realize like, oh, wait a second, I got to go the other way with this, even after he had said $4 trillion. And then they let Sinema and Portman come in and dick around, and they lose all of the momentum. They allow people like Manchin to develop the war chest and the relationships to fight against this. And then it gets mired for another year and a half, and it ends up being split apart.
Well, I don't know that even in your proposed quick strike scenario that Joe Manchin then becomes a reliable partner of the Democratic Party.
I just don't think he would have had the
same
time.
With Kirsten Sinema. I mean, no, I think that the reality is that there wasn't really a working majority for what certainly the vast majority of Democrats wanted at that point. And so they had to be brought along. Now, it's deeply frustrating, and it was a real problem that was kind of masked by the Dobbs decision and what happened in the 2022 elections and candidate quality on the Republican side that masked a loss. Actually, the national popular vote in the House in 2022 was Democrats lost that by a couple points, and they're going to lose the presidency national popular vote by probably the exact same amount, by like 2 points. So really nothing changed from 2022 to 2024 in that regard. It is certainly true that spending the better part of 2 years of that crucial part of Biden's presidency mired in negotiations where the most vocal and leading face of the Democratic Party, from anyone who would just sort of look up at the television and see it, was Joe Manchin, because he was the one being asked about everything, was not good for the brand of the Democratic Party. I mean, that's certainly true.
Well, neither was Biden. I mean, that's the problem is just that in this information age, right, we're seeing some of the breakdowns of how these Trump voters consume their information. And a lot of this can be condescending or whatever, but it is obvious that a lot social media and online news, or people that paid attention less to the news, broke for Trump at the end of the day. And Biden not being able to articulate this kind of stuff towards the end of his presidency, I think really hurt, because there was no overarching vision for what the Democrats were selling. I mean, you know what Trump's vision is when you hear him talk. He's going to be a breaker, and he's a nativist, and he's going to crack down on immigration and whatever. But what was the brand of what the Democrats were offering? I think it was really hurt in the time period where there was a leadership vacuum and a branding vacuum that Biden contributed to. And then when they talk about democracy, how can you make the case that democracy is on the ballot when they didn't even go through a primary process, which creates, in hindsight, some democratic legitimacy, but also Biden's presence undercuts the democracy point in and of itself because he seems incompetent and unable to do the job. How can you sell that urgency with him being the face? I mean,
I am less. I don't think that there was a single person out there who voted against or voted for Trump because there was no primary. But the loss of a primary,
right,
as a process in and of itself, would have maybe made a candidate more sensitive to what actual issues were out there.
Or spotlighted, other Democratic policy proposals for a year and a half.
Exactly.
As opposed to this whole lead up to that debate where Democrats weren't out there, on the presidential level. The first debate with Biden.
That would have required Biden to have left the office.
Exactly.
Year and change ago. Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.